Hi, everyone. It's Lydia with the Avanti Wellness podcast and YouTube channel. And today I'm sitting here with Nicole Lavery. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, Lydia. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's good to see you again. So, guys, I interviewed Nicole on my other podcast and we had such a great time. I wanted her to come over to the wellness podcast so we could talk more about what she's doing and what they're able to bring as a kind of a new consciousness in the wellness and health space. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we get started and dive into that, I'm going to ask Nicole to introduce herself. Give us some background. Where did you come from and how did you find where you are today so that we get a chance to get to know you a little better?
Of course. Well, thank you again, Lydia. So happy to be here. And yeah, to introduce myself again, I am Nicole Lavery. I spent the better part of 15 years. So the vast majority of my career was in the corporate space, which I joke I'm still recovering from. But, born and raised Texan up until a few years ago, was living in Dallas. And, like I said, I went to college. Most of my career was very much rooted in the corporate space, in tech, in project management, and writing. And I climbed the ladder like I felt like I, was really meant to do, as I think a lot of us are, just kind of conditioned and brought up in the world of, you make money, you have a really solid 8 to 5 job, and you succeed in that way. And I did that for such a long time until I hit my own little patch of burnout a few years ago. Was pretty high up in the corporate space, a director level position. And I just had this moment where I sat back and I thought, this isn't really fulfilling me anymore. I don't think it ever has. It served a lot of purposes. It taught me a lot of lessons. But when it comes to heart-centered, purpose-driven work, I just wasn't there in my career. So I had a little bit of a meltdown, decided to walk away from my job, take a little bit of time to really figure out, what I wanted to do, what was I meant to do. And, for most of my life, as a separate space for my career, I was just always interested in health and wellness. I was a ballerina growing up, so always very mindful of health and physicality. And so I decided when I stepped away from corporate that I really wanted to dedicate some time to digging into my passion. So I got my health coaching certification from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition several years ago. And I decided to start up my own health coaching practice, which I did for about 6 months. It was great. I was really loving the work, digging into, like I said, my passion, working with clients. But all the while, I just felt like there was a piece that was missing. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I just knew that the more I did my own work through different modalities of therapy to really understand myself and others, the more I kind of attained a little bit of a spiritual ascension and became really one with my intuition, started to channel more, had a lot of, psychic moments, I guess you could say. And so there was part of me that was loving the health coaching side, but just wanted to figure out, how do I tap into my own intuition and bring this piece of it into this work? I know people so well, I can sense things, but can't quite put my finger on what might be going on. But all of that's to say, I manifested a meeting a couple years ago with a woman who derived this quantum healing modality that I have now been trained and do as part of my day-to-day. Her name is Mary Jo Gentert. I know we can save some of that for another part of this podcast, but in a nutshell, I met her at the farmer's market. She told me about what she did. And in that moment, I realized that's the missing piece to my health coaching, is this quantum healing modality. And in the moment, in the time I met her, I knew nothing about it, but I just sensed there was so much more to learn. And that's kind of the most recent part of my story and what has led me to today.
Have you had any personal experiences with healing from the modality that you now do?
Yes, that was the first thing that I jumped into when I had that conversation with her. I thought, this sounds so fascinating, but I need to just see it for myself, right? This sounds so incredible, how she was describing to me that we can take a wooden pendulum tap into another person's energetic body, whether in person or remotely, with a handful of health protocol charts and identify and clear imbalances in their body. She told me that, and I thought, okay, wow, this sounds too good to be true, right? I'm going to book an appointment. I want to see about it for myself. And so I had one appointment with her 6 weeks later, and what she was able to find in my body without me informing her of anything was nothing short of mind blowing. Just for a couple of examples, she identified that I had inherited water toxicity from my mother's side of the family. So she found this with her pendulum and her chart as she's working on my system. And she asked me out of nowhere, she goes, did your mother grow up in the Midwest, like farming community? And I thought, how does this woman know? I'm like, yes, my mom was born and raised in Kansas. Why? And she said, well, the specific type of water toxicity that's coming up for your body that you inherited from your mom is called paraquat, and it's notorious for being used in farming communities. And so she said, based on what my pendulum landed on with this chart, I thought it was worth a guess. And it was that moment when I realized, wow, the information that we can glean from this type of energy work, coupled with how I felt after the session, which was incredible, after she cleared out a lot of imbalances in my body, that's when I started to realize, like, I might want to do this as part of my career.
That's awesome. Well, in the other interview, didn't you have other like physical ailments that you
Yes.
were working on? Because I think for this podcast, it's a wellness podcast, so it's a lot more traditional. And so people need to know, like, if you actually had something and then it was able to clear, they
Yeah,
want to hear that,
of course. Yes. So when I went to see her initially, I had a few issues that I had been working on throughout the course of my life, seeing Western doctors, making some progress, but not all the way seeing like a complete transformation. And so when I started to get into more Eastern modalities, acupuncture, Reiki several years ago, that's when I got a little bit more open-minded to energy. So when I saw her for this session, and I said, irritable bowel syndrome, some painful menstrual cramps, some hot flashes at night. I kind of gave her like 4 or 5 things that I was dealing with that, like I said, I had made some progress with working on, Western approaches, but not like seeing all the way progress. So I gave her those issues that I was dealing with. And that's when she started to make these connections during the energetic, session that we were having through her pendulum and chart. Her pendulum was landing her on different imbalances that were connected to these issues. So IBS, for example, that paraquat I mentioned a second ago, that water toxicity was a driving force behind my irritable bowel syndrome and digestion never working properly. She was able to say, oh, it's this type of water toxicity. And by the way, we have the ability with this protocol to clear it from your body. And she explained, you might purge a little bit, you might have some detox symptoms afterwards. And I did. And alongside that, within the next week to 2 weeks, as my body was resetting, every single issue that we had worked on together, I had noticed significant improvement on. And so that's what made me realize, like, I want to start seeing her more frequently to understand what else can we clear from my body, not just tied to those issues, but other ones that came up along the way. And the same thing happened. She was able to identify these imbalances, clear them from my body. I would have a little bit of a purge, and then the symptoms would greatly, greatly improve.
Yeah. So before we go into, because I want you to share some of your case studies and your stories, because that's always fun for people to listen to, because they might find something that they can relate to based on what you've been able to work on. I want to just share with everyone my own personal experience of Nicole. So just so y'all know, I didn't know Nicole before this. She actually reached out to me. I think she found, I wonder if you found my podcast through the word oneness. How did you find my podcast? Do you remember?
I did. I was on YouTube and was doing some keyword searches for different spirituality and wellness podcasts and popped into the oneness one.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And then she came over to my website and then she emailed me and she was like, this is what I do. Does this interest you? Would you want to talk about it? And I was like, yes. And so we worked it out and we had an opportunity. But I also, same thing, I kind of said, I need to feel, I would like to experience this for myself, because the more I get a chance to experience it, the more I'll know, how to share it. And so she did a treatment. Is that what you call it? A treatment? What do
Like
you call it?
a
A
session or a
session. Okay.
clearing. Mhm.
I was just talking about treatment in the last podcast. So, yes, she did a session on me. She told me I don't have to be, sitting in a chair, like receiving it, even though she's in Colorado and I'm in Texas. She just said, don't be sleeping. Like that's the only criteria that, I could be like doing whatever I did for my day. But I actually, at that hour that we scheduled, I sat in a chair and I was mindful as well about working on I gave her like 4 topics that I wanted to look into. One of them was I had this lingering cold since December, like the end of December, all the way through. Here it is, February at the time. And I was really on the remnants of getting rid of that. And she was able to find it and see that it was the end of the virus, and that I did have a virus, and it felt like the end. And then I had some other like non-physical things that I asked her to look at, like prosperity, work related, finding like that ideal, perfect job that I was wanting to create. And I don't have news for y'all yet, but it's possible I'll have news for y'all soon about what's changing in my life for that area. So I don't want to talk about it till it's inked up, but it's coming. So that's exciting. So that's kind of a shift from the time that you did the session. And then I think I just asked her to check, make sure that I wasn't blocking myself in the way of being open to relationships and positive relationships coming my way. And she said she didn't see anything that was like major for me to blocking it. And I said, great, that's awesome. That's all I need to know, is that I'm not subconsciously blocking anything from coming wonderfully into my life. And I can't remember what the fourth, seems like there was a fourth something that I was asking to work on. But anyway, so far, 2 out of the 2 out of the 3 are coming up roses in my favor. So it's exciting, and we wanted to talk about it here. But a lot of people have a lot bigger health issues that they're dealing with, and a lot of times, I'm just going to make this assumption. You can correct me, Nicole, if I'm wrong, but like people do all the traditional stuff. They take all the meds, they go to all the doctors, they look for all the answers, and they don't get anywhere, because there's a bigger, like maybe a spiritual or conscious connection to the problem. And people don't associate like belief and thought with manifesting in a health crisis. And so I believe like that. And I know that's a big part of healing. And so that's when they finally find, Nicole or the team. So tell us a little bit about, some of the people that have exhausted all their traditional resources, and then what you've found working with them, because I know you have a lot of clients.
Of course, yes. And I just have to say a big amen to what you said a second ago about thought and intention, and it being so intertwined with our own physical healing process. I mean, we see that time and time again in clients, as mindset plays such a role. And the beautiful thing is, with this work, we can tap in and reset the mindset to its originally intended state. The mindset lives in the spinal cord matter, which is so exciting. And so we've been working on that with some clients who have been seeing a lot of progress in their healing, but just running up against a wall. We tap in, we ask specifically about their spinal cord, and lo and behold, there's, for example, some inherited trauma, some water toxicity, some microorganisms that are imbalanced. We can clear those out, and the relief that these people are starting to feel just in their day-to-day, how they're approaching, stressors in their life, their perspective is shifting. So I just wanted to say, like, 100% agree with what you said about the mind-body connection is so real. And yeah, to answer your question about some case examples, I would say like one of my favorite stories has to do with twin boys that I work on. They're toddlers, 2 years old. I started working on them about 8 months ago, and they were a lot smaller and teenier, and they were born with a handful of health issues. One of the twins in particular, severely developmentally delayed, was a lot further behind than his brother on some of those benchmarks. And, as typical toddlers, they had some behavioral issues and, caught colds regularly. But their mother was more focused on, how do I get these boys to grow and develop? We're doing all the right things. We're eating all the right foods, filtering water, filtering air, seeing movement specialists. Like, maybe there's something energetic to look at here. And so from the moment I started to work with the boys, it was fascinating for me just to see the similarities, obviously, because they share DNA, but the inherent differences between the two. The more developmentally delayed toddler, as I was working on, inherited a lot more mercury and arsenic from the dad side of the family, a lot more glyphosate and, some physical trauma and emotional trauma from both sides of the family. The more and more we worked to clear that out, he was starting to, ever so slightly shift in the right direction of, crawling more and had stronger motor skills. And, one of my favorite stories about them, because I think with energy work, some people can be a little bit skeptical and apprehensive to really accept, like, is it placebo? Is it really the mind telling us that something's happening? Well, with, 18-month-old boys who have no clue what's going on at all, it's been beautiful to see the shifts in them mid-session. So I'll be working on them and I'll text their mom and just say, hey, just FYI, I'm getting started. And they will be in the middle of throwing a fit, which I'll be working on behavior, for example, during that session. And a lot of times for behavior, what will come up is parasites, very common in all of us. But for them in particular, parasites would come up, some food imbalances, some nutrition stuff, and I'm clearing it out. And in real time, I'm getting a text from their mother saying, oh my gosh, they're giggling now. They went from screaming to giggling in just the last 3 minutes, and took both of us by surprise, because again, it's like they have no idea what's going on, but this energy work is so powerful that, beyond the improvements that we're seeing in their symptoms, there's also this beautiful component of behavior too that just can like do a 180 really quickly. So I love working on little ones. Another example I have is, this is my client's cat got in a fight. This was several months ago. She texted me and she said, I don't know if you work on animals, but I've taken my cat to the vet and they just said there's nothing that they can do. There's some ointment that the cat's allergic to, so that's not an option. Which is anything you can do, can you please help? And again, here's a cat, kind of like the toddler, has no clue what's going on, doesn't know them, and to tap in and do energy work. But through quantum entanglement, I was able to remotely tap in, and through texting with the owner, making sure, the cat was awake and could receive the work. And what was identified through this with the pendulum and the health protocol chart, all of these little tiny particles that we can grasp in the quantum field, these particles of physical trauma from the fight. And so his body brought me to, on my anatomy chart, the eye. It's perfect because his eye was scratched. And I just spent the better part of, half hour, 45 minutes clearing out these particles of trauma. Clear, 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 clear. They were located in a few different parts of his body, clearing those. And about 20 minutes later, I got a text from the owner, a picture of him with both eyes open, whereas 30 minutes before, he could not have opened his left eye. It was swollen shut. So this just, it continues to amaze me, the power of the quantum field. We're all interconnected. Entanglement is here, whether we like it or not. But we have the ability to take these teeny tiny little subatomic particles and change their frequency, allow the body to return to its place of being able to heal on its own. I'm really just a facilitator here. I'm clearing what doesn't belong and facilitating the body to heal. But I would say, of all the stories that I have of all the clients that I work with, I love to use those because it really kind of defies the opportunity for us to sit back and say, is anything like really happening there? It's like when you have a cat heal and two toddlers, like very quickly, it just goes to show the power of this work, which I love so much.
There's two things that I want to discuss next. And while you were talking, I realized that our listeners haven't necessarily been defined what is quantum. So I'm going to talk about that real quick. So everyone knows the physical world. This is our bodies, the heart, the lungs, things we can see and touch. That is all in the physical world. Everything beyond the physical is in the quantum space. So when you hear quantum, it's the beyond the physical. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, is this quantum realm. And I want Nicole to define for us, like, what is quantum entanglement? Because the listeners from Avanti Wellness probably have, and possibility, have never even heard that before. My oneness podcast people probably had, in some cases. So are you comfortable defining, by the way, did I define that right?
Yes, very
okay.
well.
Okay.
Very, very, very well.
So do you want to help explain? Because I think we just jumped in. We didn't even explain what it is that you do, what's it called, and why is it called that, and what do you do with that, right? Let's go back a little bit and go back to defining what quantum entanglement is and quantum therapy, and like what you call what you do, so people can have a concept or Google it if they want to.
Of course, yes. So I am by trade a quantum, I guess I should call it like a quantum energy practitioner is the technical term. And a lot of my work relies on what is called quantum entanglement. And as you so perfectly described, like the non-physical world, quantum looks at everything smaller than an atom, whereas Newtonian physics looks at atom and bigger, the big things we can see, we can touch, we can grab, matter as we come to think of it. The quantum looks at subatomic, so the teeny, teeny, teeny little tiny particles and waves that can exist in different forms at any given time. And so quantum entanglement suggests that we are all interconnected, right? Like all particles can exist in such a matter to where they're influencing one another, but don't have to be connected through time and space as we think of time and space, right?
Yeah, or physically.
Physically, exactly. And so through entanglement, and this is the majority of the work that I do, is called non-local healing, which is I don't need to be next to a person to work on them. I leverage quantum entanglement, right? The interconnectedness of all of us, everything being energy. I use a wooden pendulum and these health protocol charts, as I mentioned previously, to become a proxy for another person with their permission. I can access their system. It's not like I can just wake up one morning and say, this person on the news that I'm seeing, like, let's see if I can play with their body.
Healing. Yeah.
Right. So once
they have to be a willing participant.
Exactly. So once I have their permission, higher consciousness knows who I have access to and who I do not. So with an individual's permission, I can become their proxy. So I can stand in for them. And through quantum entanglement, as I mentioned, this interconnectedness of all of us, I can identify these subatomic particles that are living not just in their body, but in their aura, in their energetic system.
Yeah, and their frequency.
Yes, I can change their frequency and instruct the body to purge it, completely purge it through one of the purging pathways, which can be tear ducts, nasal, breath, obviously bowel movements, urine, sweat, all these different ways that we purge. We have the ability through this protocol to tell the body, like, hey, get that thing out, change the frequency, get it out. And so that's the majority of the work that I do. I also work with people in person, but my practice has kind of grown to the point to where I'm working with people all around the world and doing this proxy. Doing the proxy is I use as an example leveraging quantum entanglement.
Yeah. So to help the listeners also understand, like, why is the proxy important? I'll just say, and I was discussing it with my previous guest on the other podcast today, is that I'm going to give an example. Like, let's say that someone's diagnosed with cancer and they know it, they believe it, there are tumors to prove it that they have cancer, and they're devastated and they don't know what they're going to do. This chemo, traditional medicine better cure them. And that's all they know. They haven't even opened their minds to that there could be a subatomic or a conscious mindset that is playing a role, even maybe even causing
Mhm.
some of the challenges. And maybe it's not direct, maybe they got exposed to smoke or a chemical or something, but it's like that block in whatever their thought process was kept it in the body instead of cleared it. And then, like, some people get cancer who've been exposed to smoke, and some people don't get cancer who've been exposed to smoke. So, like, why did I get it, when I was exposed to smoke? So it's that alternative other layer that might not be being addressed at the major cancer institutions. So when a proxy who doesn't have all the belief systems, does not have the blocks, does not have the issues, the traumas, the stuff, can come in there and clear me and
Mhm.
believe that my body can clear and clean of my cancer, even though I might have trouble with those blocks. That's why a person or a proxy, like she's talking about, is helpful to
Yeah.
work with, because you have the blocks, you have the challenge. If you can't figure it out or believe it for yourself, let someone else believe it out of you, right?
Mhm.
I mean, is this kind of, how you would, this is Lydia's version of description
It's
of
perfect.
how I would describe
Mhm.
it. So people are like, why do I need Nicole? You know?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Like, I think, another way of saying it is just an independent third party. It is what a proxy is. Like I said, like you said, I don't hold on to the baggage. I don't have those same imbalances. I also keep my frequency at such a place to where I kind of liken it to being the really tall guy at the grocery store. I can grab things off the top shelf that you can't quite reach through
Yeah.
your frequency, through just you living in your own state of consciousness. That's why a proxy, like a third party, can come in and really help to expedite the process of your body purging, letting go, releasing, healing, and then just getting you right back on track to where you originally intended to be from the time that you were created. It's just life and inherited stuff, and imbalances, like I talked about, can knock us off. So really, I'm coming in here as a third party, as your proxy, to just bring you back on track, to get you back to healing.
And a lot of people can relate to having seen a counselor or going to a therapist. And it's similar because you go to a counselor or a therapist just to get another perspective because
Mhm.
you're stuck and you can't figure it out
Right.
on your own. And so it's kind of like that, but it has to do with like a physical healing, or it can be an emotional or a spiritual healing. It's not limited to health in the concept of physical health. It can be mental
Yes.
health. Like I can see people who have ADHD and who have anxiety who could really benefit from your type of services, because maybe I don't know why I have ADHD,
Mhm.
ADHD, like
Yes, 100%. And on that note, actually, we've been really digging in lately to the cranial nerves, doing a lot of healing from those, which are like the foundational part of how we were built. And now, as we're working through the cranial nerves on clients, ADHD, anxiety, a lot of mental, emotional health type issues that are so prevalent in today's society, we're seeing are connected to these cranial nerves being off, not just the vagus nerve, but some of the ancillary nerves that can, for a variety of reasons, kind of cause like this trigger effect throughout the body to occur that results in anxiety and those other things that you mentioned previously. So yeah, it's just the world is our oyster, I like to say, when it comes to this. So if ever anyone is dealing with something and they're like, I just have not had good luck in these places that I've looked so far, that's why a modality like this can be really helpful to bring some peace and resolution.
yeah. I I want to say something about the physical that I heard. I think it was yesterday or day before. And it's just a good thing to remember. But it was that they're learning in science that the muscles are our pharmacy, and the muscles are generating the hormones in the body. And so, like, the more muscular you can keep your muscles big and strong, it will generate more of what you need. And so I'm saying that because a lot of the mental health things have to do with hormone levels and your endocrine system and what your, like serotonin and, norepinephrine and, all the things you need. If you have the muscles to produce the pharmacy, then, it will support more of what it is you're trying to accomplish if you have some of these um, challenges that we're talking about, like ADD and anxiety and depression. We didn't mention depression, but think when you, I mean, I don't take any medications, but when you hear how many people are on prescriptions, especially like over 50, or depression medication in children, oh my God, it makes me so sad to hear all these children getting, pumped up with chemicals and ah, ugh. What about something like this that can just clear them
Mm-hmm.
of whatever it is that's challenging them, so they don't have to be constantly filtering
I know.
synthetic medications? I hate that. Plus, it's expensive. Who wants to spend the money on all that?
I know, and I'm such a big believer in, like, there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals, and I respect them for what they do in certain situations, but I do feel like there's chronic overuse, and there's just this like inherited habit, I think, to just jump to like what's a med that we can use. And the
Quick.
reality is, like, we have so many things at our disposal lifestyle wise. Food really is medicine. Hydration helps the brain to be able to kind of offset some of these issues that can lead to anxiety, depression, ADHD, sunshine, circadian rhythm, resistance training. I mean, all the things that we are
Grounding.
grounding, right, we're including in our book that I'll talk about in a second. We're seeing like how profoundly powerful the foundations are, and if people just can get back to the foundations, in so many cases they'll realize, like, I really don't need that pharmaceutical because I'm able to regulate my blood pressure. I'm able to approach stress in a more grounded, regulated way. And that's another thing we see in our practice as we're working on people, is we can ask these questions of, like, what lifestyle habits would really benefit your body? When we're tapping into someone's subconscious, we can figure out, are they eating enough? Are they eating too much? Are they getting the right amino acids? What about hydration? Are they getting in enough ounces of water? That's why I love this modality so much, is to get that level of clarity to help people understand, like, here's your roadmap to just achieving optimal health. If we go about it, a way that is like not the traditional Western way, but there's so much information we can glean from our body to really help us thrive on every level.
Well, and when you believe that the body is so intelligent that it's keeping you alive every single day, and you're not having you don't have a say in like all the little automated responses that your body's going through. You're just like, what's going to happen today? Like,
Mhm.
when you understand your body's so intelligent, you just got to trust it and give it what it needs. Find out what the cells need, give it what it needs, and then let it go, let it flow and let it heal. So yeah, but while we're wrapping up, will you tell me about the book? And then I think there were two things you wanted to talk about. Did we cover one of them? Did we cover the two things you wanted to discuss? I think it was just
I
the case studies, right?
Yes, the case studies, and I will plug the book now by giving a little bit of background to everyone about how this book came to be. My mentor and the woman who developed this healing modality, her name is Mary Jo Gentert, and another colleague of mine, Lori Jeffrey. The three of us have really tapped into the intricacies of this healing protocol over the last few months and made some very wild realizations. One of which occurred a few months ago when we were looking at aging and what really accelerates aging in the body, what can help to bring down the aging rate. And we realized that with our protocol, we have the ability to ask the body, are you aging as intended? Get a yes or a no, clear out any imbalances that are accelerating that process, and significantly slow down the aging process, and in some cases reverse it. So alongside that research and starting to roll this out to our clients, we realized, there's obviously, above and beyond the energy work that we're doing to make this occur in the body, there is a lifestyle component, because our clients are going to want to, after a session with us, like, go out into the world and live their lives, but they're also going to want to keep their aging rate that we've reset them at, which we've realized is the average is 0.04% is our intended aging rate as a population. They're going to want to keep this 0.04 or 0.02 or negative number that we've reset them to. How do they do this? And so through muscle testing, through our own research, we have developed a pretty in-depth protocol and outlined a lot of our research findings just to help people understand, like, you can continue this on after you get out of a session with us. It's the right kind of food, the right kind of water. I alluded to sunshine earlier, a regulated circadian rhythm, the right type of resistance training. The list goes on. So we are in the process of finishing this book now. We're aiming to have it out late spring, early summer, so the next few months. You can check out my website, which I know we'll plug at the very end, but I will be, posting about this and bring it out into the world when it's ready. But in the meantime, just keep your eyes peeled and know that there's a lot happening in the energy world, specifically as it pertains to aging and the aging process, which is what the three of us are really spearheading right now.
Okay, so tell us the title of the book.
Yes, it will be called Aging as Intended.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because that tech guy who, his name is Brian, and he's totally into this anti-aging thing. By the way, I don't think he looks that healthy when I see him. He looks like worn out, but it's weird because, like, he was on the Kardashians and they were doing their thing. And I'm like, is anyone else feeling that way, that he doesn't quite look as healthy as they're all saying? He looks like he's over stressing his body by doing too much or something. There's something about, when you try to control too much, then you take the element out of the body to do what it naturally, like I just said, it's intelligent, right? So if you come from it with a more relaxed, instead of I'm making my body younger, the body will naturally get younger when you give it the things you just listed: the sunshine, that's the right amount of sleep. The cells need the water. They need oxygen. That's another thing that I read that book about rebounding, and they said that there was like a 5 formula thing that you need. And one of them that I think even Americans don't get their cells enough oxygen in a day, because not everybody is exercising every single day. But just like you got to give your body water every day, you really have to give your body oxygen. And so that's where my rebounding that I do on this channel is to help get me like 10 minutes worth of oxygen in a really fast, rapid way to pump my cells from head to toe in oxygen.
Love it. Like you said, there's so much power in the foundationals, oxygen, hydrogen, which is so crucial to our body as well. Like, I do look at, someone like Brian Johnson, who is going to these extremes and these great lengths, and to each his or her own, I like to say. But what we see in our practice, when these, aspects that we're outlining in the book, like when they're instituted, when they're put into practice in the body, like the shifts that can occur are mind blowing. And it's all just about the foundations and getting back to basics and nature and how we were intended to live from the very beginning. There's a lot of power there.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to just kind of say, like, about my comment. I mean, it sounded very judgmental, and I really don't want to be that judgmental. I just wanted to say that I wanted to come from a space of just using an example of someone who has all the resources and the money to go ahead and take action on all these things, that I just wanted to bring to fruition the concept of the allowing and the intelligence and believing in your body and supporting your body. And when you find out what your body needs, give it to it. That's the hardest part for us, is honoring what the body needs and then making it happen, because
That
that's not always easy to exercise every day and always drink the right amount of water and always get the right amount of sleep and always eat the right amount of foods without the right, type of foods, without the chemicals and the air quality and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not easy to give your body what it's going to be optimal. That's a job in itself without the active, for drinking blood or whatever,
yeah,
blood infusions or whatever they're doing to be young. I don't know. But I'm just supporting natural wellness. That's what this podcast is about, natural wellness. And don't force it. Just try to do your best and
so
see
well
where you land.
so well said. Could not have
Right.
said it better to all of that. Yes.
And I want to also admit publicly that I'm still working on it. Like, I'm not done yet. I'm not the best I could be. That's what the podcast is about, is interviewing people, learning from people, working on myself. And I'm just bringing y'all along in the journey so y'all can watch the transformation as it happens. Right.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, tell us about where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you.
Of course. Yes. My website is NicoleLavery.com. You can reach me at Nicole@NicoleLavery.com. As I mentioned, I will be posting about the book once it is released. But if you have any interest in a session or would like to pre-order, send me an email to that email address, and one of us will be in touch with you very soon.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
I don't think so. I just want to thank you again, Lydia, so much for this opportunity, and just love all the work that you're doing to bring all of these different people on your podcast. So much appreciate it.
Thank you for being a guest. It's fun to get to know you, and I appreciate you taking the time so that the world can get to know the important work that you're doing. And I hope that my intention for this podcast is that it gets to all the right people who need to hear this message. And we're putting it out there on the global airwaves so that if you can find a resonance with this, conversation, that possibly you could be helped. I don't know. But at least having an open mind, for me personally, I think my open mind is one of my greatest attributes. I love that part of me, and I am just open to being open. And so lots of lovely things come to me through my openness. And I wish that for you guys out there who are listening, that if you feel desolate and that your health challenges are just exacerbated by, frustration because you haven't been able to figure it out yet, just be open. Like, don't shut a door on a possibility for healing. And we know you can heal. We just want you to know that you can heal, right, Nicole?
Yes, it is all possible. It's what our bodies were intended to do from the very beginning.
Yes, and all is well. Thank you, guys. We will see you next time. And hang in there, Nicole. Don't jump off. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.